I get a lot of comments calling me weird for doing makeup. But truth be told, I've been trying to live into this image that people painted for me my whole life. Like playing sports or trying to get into the military, but I couldn't because I had heart surgery. I've always been into makeup, but when I started to get into it when I was 17, my dad used to really call me rude and homophobic slurs that really made me lose my passion. I was also insecure on how the rest of my family was judging me and also the outside world. But doing makeup is something that I love and also a part of who I am. So recently I've been just trying to embrace myself a little more and the talent that I've been gifted with. I've never opened up about something this personal on my TikTok, so this is just something a little more vulnerable that my followers could connect with so they can feel like they know a piece of who I am and where I come from. Now that y'all heard my story, I want y'all to rate this look.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, "Did you guys feel that?" And we're all like, "What are you talking about, Laura?" She's like, "I swear something just touched my lower back." And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared. And we spend the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Nina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, "Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on your bathroom wall." And Roxy's like, "Oh, don't worry, that stain's always there." She's like, "We actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway." And then Roxy says, "But that's why we think our house is haunted." We all look at her kind of shocked, and she's like, "Yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over, because it can get kind of creepy." But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed, because that's when stuff started getting weird.
Storytime on how my parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, let's get straight into it. Ever since I was a kid, everyone would compliment me on how beautiful I was. Literally got complimented everywhere me and my family went. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, it's important. My parents didn't see me as their beautiful child. My parents seen me as dollar signs. I was literally up for sale, and my parents were bidding on who would pay the most to marry me. My mom started teaching me how to cook and clean and how to keep a man happy. One day while my mom was getting me ready and all dolled up for dinner, I told my mom I didn't want to marry anyone, and she flat out told me I didn't have a choice. Well, little did I know that exact night my mom and I was having this conversation, my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom was getting me all dolled up for dinner, and my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. I didn't know this at the time, of course. My mom and I go downstairs, and I hear my dad say, "There she is. Isn't she beautiful?" Then I looked at a man who just smiled and said, "I like it." I asked my mom who was that guy, and she told me, "Shh, that's your father's brother, sweetie, no more talking." So we all sat down and had dinner, and my uncle was just staring at me, smiling at me, and looking at me up and down. He was literally studying me. My dad even looked at him for validation. I was so confused. Little did I know this wasn't just a dinner. It was a tryout, an audition, if you will. If I would be good enough for my uncle. He was actually rich and looking for a wife, and my dad was trying to sell me to him. Running out of time, like for part 3. Part 3 on how my parents sold me to my uncle. So like I said, we were having dinner and my dad was trying to sell me to my rich uncle. He was literally pitching a sale. She's beautiful, she cooks, she cleans, and she's very smart. And oh, she still has her V card. It was at that moment it hit me. I figured out what was going on. When my uncle left, my parents told me good job for being a good girl. I cried and told my parents I did not want to marry that man. I was 15 and he was like 40, but my parents told me I was going to marry him and I was going to like it. Well, fast forward a year later and they definitely sold me. And I lost my V card to my uncle on our wedding night. I hated it at first, but I kind of fell in love with him. And it didn't hurt that he was rich and I kind of lived stress-free. So yeah, my parents sold me and that sucks, but I ended up being okay with it. Lucky. And we all laugh about it now. Yeah, I know it's toxic and corrupt, but this is why it's an anonymous story.
Today at work, I was trying to call my wife, but for some reason, my phone calls weren't getting through to her. So I used one of my coworkers' phones to dial my house number and call home. So I call home, and a sweet voice answers the phone. It's my daughter. I go, "Hey, cutie, how you doing?" She goes, "Hey, daddy, what's up?" And I go, "I'm just at work. What are you and mommy doing?" She says, "Well, I just finished lunch, and mommy's upstairs." I go, "Cutie, what's mommy doing upstairs?" She goes, "She's with Uncle Paul." And I go, "Uncle Paul? We don't have an Uncle Paul. What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, she's with Uncle Paul. They're upstairs in their room." So I'm like, "Cutie, that doesn't sound right." So what I want you to do is I want you to leave the phone on the kitchen table, go upstairs to your mommy's room and say, "Hey, daddy just pulled in the driveway," and tell me what happens, all right? did it, and like a minute later, she comes back and picks up the phone and goes, okay, Daddy, I did it. And I go, okay, what happened? She goes, well, Mommy came running out of her room naked, and she tripped down the stairs and bumped her head, and now she can't get up. So I was like, what about the other guy? And she goes, well, Uncle Paul tried to jump out of the window into the pool, but he missed and hit the floor. Now he won't wake up. So I was like, we don't have a pool. Then I look at the phone number, and I was like, oh, sorry, wrong number. Today at work, I was trying to call my wife, but for some reason, my phone calls weren't getting through to her. So I used one of my coworkers' phones to dial my house number and call home. So I call home, and a sweet voice answers the phone. It's my daughter. I go, hey, cutie, how you doing? She goes, hey, Daddy, what's up? And I go, I'm just at work. What are you and Mommy doing? She says, well, I just finished lunch, and Mommy's upstairs. I go, cutie, what's Mommy doing upstairs? She goes, she's with Uncle Paul. And I go, Uncle Paul? We don't have an Uncle Paul. What do you mean? She's like, yeah, she's with Uncle Paul. They're upstairs in their room. So I'm like, cutie, that doesn't sound right. So what I want you to do is I want you to leave the phone on the kitchen table, go upstairs to your mommy's room and say, hey, Daddy just pulled in the driveway, and tell me what happens, all right? Did it, and like a minute later, she comes back and picks up the phone and goes, okay, Daddy, I did it. And I go, okay, what happened? She goes, well, Mommy came running out of her room naked, and she tripped down the stairs and bumped her head, and now she can't get up. So I was like, what about the other guy? And she goes, well, Uncle Paul tried to jump out of the window into the pool, but he missed and hit the floor. Now he won't wake up. So I was like, we don't have a pool. Then I look at the phone number, and I was like, oh, sorry, wrong number.
I had a crush on my brother's best friend. We're gonna call him Pedro. One day, my brother and Pedro had a plan to go to the beach together, and then Pedro invited me. And I was like, let me check if I have something to do. I don't. I'm going. I'm gonna go, Pedro. Don't worry. The night before, I was like, I need to look scandalous. Like, so scandalous. So I remember I wore this two-piece bathing suit. So long story short, the day came, and we went to the beach. So we get to the water, and immediately I go in. I wanted to show him, like, I'm a bra girl. Oh, this is the best part. So I'm coming out of the water and I'm trying to look like a baddie. Like, I'm trying to walk out all cute, like the hair is wet and everything. And I noticed Pedro was looking at my legs. So I was like, maybe he's trying to shoot his shot. So I went to go tell him something. And I was like, why do you keep looking at me? And he was like, look at your legs. I look at my legs. There's a whole ass piece of poop from the beach water.
Around a year ago, my husband anxiously sat me down and told me he had discovered he had a long-lost daughter. According to him, he had an ex he got pregnant as a teenager, but she moved away before she started showing and without telling him. She gave birth and kept his daughter a secret from him. Eventually, she put Kat up for adoption. Kat now tracked him down and wanted to get to know him. As I am unable to conceive on my own, I was very enthusiastic and encouraging of them meeting. I asked him about DNA testing or speaking to the mother or adoptive parents. He told me all of that would come in due time, but based on the details she shared with him, he was 90% sure she was his biological daughter. Their first few visits together were private, but eventually we had a big dinner at my house. My husband has seen Kat numerous times since then, both with and without me present. About a week ago, a young man I've never met before messaged me on Facebook. He was Kat's ex-boyfriend, and he wanted me to know that this was the woman my husband had been sleeping with. He must have misunderstood Kat's relationship with my husband. When I asked my husband about it, he started crying. He thought I went through his phone and found the text messages between him and Kat. Messages when she was in character, which is how he segued into telling me that they're in a fake, incestuous daddy-daughter relationship.
I do substitute teaching from time to time, and last week I actually had the substitute for a 7th grade biology class. So the teacher contacted me the night before to tell me what the students are learning, what their homework was and all that, and what the game plan was. So I created a list of questions to test the students on if they understood what they're learning and if they did their homework. The next day I walk into class, and as the day progresses, I tell the students, I said, I have a list of questions and I want you guys to answer them. The first question I asked the class was, what body part increases its size by 10 times when stimulated? Now, all of a sudden, this girl named Kate raises her hand and says, you are the worst substitute teacher. How can you be asking a group of 7th graders that question? You are disgusting. I'm going to go home and tell my parents and you're going to get fired. So I ignore Kate completely, but she keeps going on about how disgusting of a question this is and this and that. But all of a sudden, this little kid named Billy raises his hand. So I go, Billy, what part of the body increases 10 times when stimulated? And he goes, the pupil, sir. And I go, correct, Billy. So I decided to go back to Kate and I say, hey, Kate, I have 3 things to tell you. Number 1, you have a dirty mind. Number 2, you didn't do the homework on the eye, and number 3, you're going to be really disappointed in your life.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom 1 time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, I don't remember her name, can I please use the restroom? And she was like, no you can't, because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester. Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated, and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, Mom, I'm sitting in class right now, my teacher won't let me use the restroom. And she was like, I'll take care of it for you. And I was like, okay. So like 5 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing. And she walks up to it and answers it, and she's like, hello? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry, and she like slams the pass on my desk, and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do, thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls.